Let's dive into this philosophical journey using a zombie apocalypse as our setting to explore some large ideas from philosophers. These ideas can help us understand how humans behave in extreme situations, like a world turned upside down by zombies. We're going to look at the different philosophers might be viewing certain actions of survivors and what they could teach us about survival, morality, and power. Let's take a look at each philosopher's idea and discuss them in a way sort of that makes sense for everyone to understand. Starting with Thomas Hobbes. Hobbes has something known as the state of nature and the social contract. Hobbes believed that without rules or a government to control us, people would act out of fear and selfishness. In his view, the world would be like a war zone with everyone fighting to protect themselves. So, in an apocalypse, like one, let's say, overrun by zombies, Hobbes would argue that people would likely get violent in fighting over resources like food and shelter. While Hobbes makes a point about self preservation, he may have been too pessimistic about human nature. People might also cooperate out of kindness, not just out of fear. In a zombie world, maybe some survivors would actually help each other just because they believe in a mutual respect, but and it's not just only to survive. A couple of examples that we have about this we can take from The Walking Dead. Rick Grimes, the main character in The Walking Dead, has set rules for his group deciding who gets what resources and how to keep everybody safe. This is Hobbes' idea of creating a social contract. People agree to follow certain rules to stay safe in a dangerous world. But Rick's leadership shows how, even in chaos, we need structure to avoid falling into violence and our own selfishness. Let's also take Friedrich Nietzsche and his idea of the will to power and overcoming challenges. Nietzsche argued that struggles and challenges are part of life's purpose. He believed we grow stronger by facing hardship, not by avoiding it. In an apocalypse, instead of giving up, Nietzsche said survivors should embrace the struggle. The obstacles they face, like fighting zombies or surviving in harsh conditions, are basically opportunities to become stronger and more capable. Nietzsche's idea of the will to power might seem a bit extreme. It could be interpreted as believing that it's okay to harm others to grow stronger, but in reality, maybe growth is more about learning how to deal with personal trauma or even just rebuilding society and not just trying to beat the world around us. An example that I can pull about this is in The Last of Us, with the second main character, whose name is Ellie. For Ellie, she goes through a lot of pain and hardship, losing friends and facing constant danger, but instead of giving up, she keeps fighting. In a Nietzschean sense, these struggles help her grow and become more complex, powerful, and an ultimately stronger person. But by the end of the story, for Ellie, she realizes that her real strength comes from understanding herself and her emotions, not just from killing enemies. For our third example, we can bring in Immanuel Kant and this idea of doing what's right. Kant was all about doing the right thing, even if it's hard. He believed that our actions should follow moral rules that everyone else should follow, not just because what's best for us personally. So, in an apocalypse, even if it might be tempting to break laws or hurt others to survive, Kant would argue we should still respect other people's rights and dignity. And it certainly hard to approach this coming from the idea that if we are in an apocalypse, survival might require making difficult choices to survive that may seem at some times morally wrong or even ambiguous. In some situations, you might have to choose between saving one person and letting others die. Kant might say this is wrong. However, I would argue in a world that is like an apocalyptic situation, these decisions are not always so clear cut. And one such example I can bring upon the positive side of Immanuel Kant's argument is from I Am Legend. Dr. Neville is working to find a cure for a virus that turned most of humanity into zombies. Even though he's alone and could easily give up, he keeps going, staying true to his belief that helping others, even when no one else is left, is still the right moral thing to do. This is Kant's idea. Do what is morally right, not just what's easy. For our fourth example, we have Michel Foucault and his idea of power and control. Foucault believed that power isn't just about who is in charge. It's everywhere and it operates in subtle ways as well, through rules, social norms, or even how people act toward each other. In a post-apocalyptic world, new power structures would form. Maybe a group of survivors would try to take control of the others, and understanding this dynamic would be key to survival. Though it's fair to argue from a critique that Foucault might focus too much on how power works at the expense of how people can use power for good, because not every leader in a survival situation is necessarily a villain who controls people through fear. Sometimes, let's say, in the case of Rick from The Walking Dead, Rick would use power to protect others, even if it's hard or unpopular. The governor, however, on the other hand, would be a character who would be using fear and control to manipulate people into following him. He pretends everything is okay, but it's just a way to keep power. In contrast, Rick struggles with how much control he should have over his group. And this shows how power, even in an apocalyptic society, can shape our lives, even if it's in a chaotic world. In our fifth example, we have Hannah Arendt and her idea of community and action. Arendt believed that humans are social creatures and that we create meaning through our relationships and actions with others. Even in a world that is falling apart, like after a zombie apocalypse, it is essential to come together with others, build new communities, and work together to rebuild society. While Arendt's focus on community is important, it's also easy to see how some survivors might isolate themselves, especially if they are experiencing too much trauma. Not everyone wants to rebuild society right away. It might take time to heal before people can work and, come together again. And an example that I can bring up about this argument from Arendt is in the movie on Netflix called The 100. And in The 100, after a nuclear disaster, effectively the survivors had to rebuild society from scratch. Clark, who was the leader, sort of understood that working together is the only way to survive long term. And she shows that building relationships and creating a community is essential for surviving, even in a broken world. For our sixth example, we have Albert Camus. Facing the absurd and finding meaning, sort of the idea behind his argument. And for Camus, he believed that life is inherently absurd, meaning it doesn't always make sense, and there's no universal meaning to life. But even though life might feel pointless sometimes, we still need to live fully and find our own purpose. In an apocalypse, the world may seem like it has no meaning. But in Camus' argument, he would say that survivors still need to fight for their own personal meaning and purpose. And I think this is a universal theme that you find in a lot of zombie movies. The main character often finds themselves building purpose by their actions, by the plot of the story, even if it's finding someone, trying to rescue someone, trying to get to a place that could mean, a higher degree of safety. This is the same argument that Camus would support, in that the survivors still are fighting for what their own personal goal is, even if the world around them makes no sense, or in this sense, feels meaningless. One critique of Camus' idea that can sound a little depressing at first, but it actually gives us a lot of freedom. It means that even in chaos, we can still create our own purpose by how we act, how we care for others, and how we choose to survive. Going back to The Walking Dead, Rick Grimes, even in a world overrun by zombies, finds meaning by protecting his family and keeping hope alive. Even though everything around him seems meaningless and absurd, he creates a purpose in his life by making sure his group survives. This is Camus' argument to a T. You may not be able to change the world, but you can still create meaning through your actions, which in a lot of times in zombie films and entertainment, it's found in the plot. And the plots are often personal and it's goal setting. So I think what we can take from this is that, each philosopher gives us a different lens through which we can understand survival. Some would say it's about cooperation and moral choices. Others would emphasize growing stronger through struggle, or recognizing how power works in a broken world. But I think what is central to all of them, in one way or another, it shows that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about finding meaning and acting in a moral and ethical way and building stronger communities, even in the face of unimaginable challenges or in a world that seems meaningless. So I hope this was able to give you an idea into some of this philosophical mindsets that a lot of characters find themselves in a lot of entertainment relating to zombies and apocalyptic situations. Thank you for watching.